And welcome to Netroots Nation. I'm so glad we're all here and so honored to share the stage with everyone who's going to come after me tonight. I'm Heidi Hess, and I'm one of the co-directors of Credo Action. I have a 5-year-old, and more than a year ago, he had an idea. I can play music really loud so Donald Trump can't sleep. And if he can't sleep, he'll be too tired to do mean things to people. Now, clearly my son is not a constitutional scholar, so he was not talking about mean things like violating the Emoluments Clause, or colluding with a foreign government to steal an election, or obstructing justice to cover up your crimes. He was talking about Trump being unfair to people with brown skin like his. He was talking about Trump separating families and making people feel scared instead of safe in their communities. My son saw Trump's meanness, and he came up with an idea to stop it. He wanted to use his power to defend people he loves and people he doesn't know from Trump. And you better believe that he expects me to use my power too. On the personal level, that meant opening our home last July as sponsors for an asylum-seeking family of 5 who had been separated at the border. A few weeks ago, it meant protesting together outside a Pelosi fundraiser after she caved to Mitch McConnell on the DHS supplemental funding bill. On the professional level, it's the work I do at Credo. The Credo Action Team, who's in the room, helps people fight for progressive values every day. Credo activists are demanding more and better from Democrats. They're defending reproductive freedom, civil rights, and the planet. They're fighting for an economy and a democracy that ensures freedom and equality for everyone. The Credo Donations Program gives $2 million to 36 progressive organizations every year. The groups we fund are leading the fights our activists are engaged in. They're also changing the landscape of the progressive movement to be more inclusive, more uncompromising, and to push far beyond the Democratic Party establishment when it comes to imagining the future that we're creating together. Credo products, Credo Mobile and Credo Energy now, long distance and credit card back in the day, exist to fuel our activism and our donations. So a big thank you to any of you in the audience who are Credo members. We literally couldn't do it without you. We are sponsors of Netroots Nation because of the awesome power in this room. We're all here to learn and to share, to deepen relationships and build new ones, because we have hard work to do with the power we have. We don't just need to close the camps, stop the raids, and reunite families. We need to force Democrats to take responsibility and make amends for decades of complicity with and leadership of racist immigration policy. We need to give legal status to the more than 11 million undocumented immigrants currently in the United States. We don't just need to end racist policing and mass incarceration. We need to create a real path to reparations at a scale that not only addresses the damage of slavery, but the systemic racism that still institutionalizes inequality for Black people in America. We don't just need to regulate greenhouse emissions and invest in clean energy. We need to pass a Green New Deal that slashes emissions, creates millions of good jobs, and provides benefits to the communities and workers facing the greatest threats from the climate crisis. And we don't just need to beat Trump in 2020. We need to create a vision for the world we all deserve in 2050 and beyond. We need to build political power that shatters business as usual in Washington to fix our economy, restore our democracy, end white supremacy and patriarchy, and save our planet. All of us in this room are here because we're doing, and are going to continue to do, the hard work to build the progressive movement. If you want your phone, and in some states your electricity provider, to be part of the movement too, I hope you'll come find the Credo team at our booth in the town square and consider becoming a Credo member. Thanks so much.
Hey ha ra ne ha ra ne ha ra ne ha ra ne ra ne ya ho ha le o pe o ya te ko he na ya te ko he na ya te ko he na ha Yahola ho hayate ko he na hale hope ho. Hanawa Guru Netroots Nation. My name is Prairie Rose Seminole, and I'm honored to bring you the greetings of these lands on the ancestral homelands of the Lenape people, the original people. I've got a PowerPoint, guys. Is it waiting for me? Oh, there we go. There we go. This is like a cartoon detonator. It's kind of funny. I hope you like my PowerPoint. I dusted off my skills for Netroots Nation. So the Lenape people, the original people, who have been pushed further away, like many tribes across the country, no longer having access to their sacred grounds. Across the world, countries are beginning to face the hard truths about the atrocities and genocides that were committed against the first peoples of the land, the indigenous people. Countries such as Australia have acknowledged the way they treated the Aboriginal people, including mass child removals, and have issued an apology. Canada had the Truth and Reconciliation Decade that they began to acknowledge the wrongdoing against First Nations peoples. They now look for ways to support those who are now elders or adults. Even now we see that here in the US, there is healing needed so desperately. But healing can't come without truth. The truth about our experience here on the land, our indigenous people's experience as a whole, or as individuals, and as tribes. Long before the arrival of Europeans, North America, Turtle Island, was home to millions of people who lived in thousands of distinct societies, formed hundreds of nations, sharing, hunting, farming societies with their own languages, cultures, and traditions. These nations had their own laws and ways of governing. There are now only 577 federally recognized tribes corralled onto 310 reservations. And even on these lands, this is where we taught our young people about life. This is where we came of age and community. This is where we traveled and learned the wonders of the earth and waters and of our human beingness. Here's where we loved and where we buried our dead. There have been recent deaths of Indigenous people and children while in the custody of the US Border Patrol. It emphasizes the grave consequences due to the lack of meaningful access to Indigenous language speakers by the American Border Patrol. Latin America has over 800 different indigenous peoples with a total population of 45 million people who speak over 488 documented languages, most who do not speak Spanish or English. Voices are on the rise. Our own and allies like you here at Netroots Nation, allies such as Representative AOC from New York City, stated that Latino people are descendants of Indigenous people and cannot be criminalized simply for their identity or status. Recently, California Governor Gavin Newsom apologized to Native people for their violence and wrongdoings they suffered during the state's history and called their mistreatment genocide. Despite centuries of efforts of government and churches to assimilate us, Indigenous people, we continue to resist and pass down our languages, ceremonies, land-based practices, and ways of governing. But the violence of colonization has left a tremendous burden of pain on all of us. And we don't need any more broken promises. What we need is new relationships, real change, together with steps and real action by all of us. Today, more Native youth graduate from high school and go on to attend college. In 2019, the highest number of Indigenous medical school graduates ever across the country were seen. In the last few years, we've seen more Native youth and women leading movements like Idle No More, Standing Rock, missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and transgendered people, Water Walkers, Indigenous Women Rising. Today, more Native people are being elected into local, state, and federal leadership positions than ever before. History is being made with Native women being elected into Congress. This is important because within our systems of government, decisions are being made that affect our lives. Earlier this year, we finally witnessed the first Native American actress to be cast in the lead role in mainstream TV, a proud San Carlos Apache woman named Siobhan Elira Rose. There continues to be more and more support for our Two-Spirit and LGBT young people, relatives who have and always been sacred to our people and our communities. Our tribes are reclaiming our ancestral rights, protecting our lands, bringing back our languages, traditional foods, reviving our culture. Young people are leading the way. Today we are seeing more firsts in our history for our people, and it is because of our resiliency and passion and the strength and vision strengthened by allies like you all in this room. This is why we do the work that we do. We know that our people need healing, all of us, and we know that truth is the first step. We're all here for a reason, through a lens of justice, from our own experiences. While you're here at Netroots Nation, I hope that you connect with one another, see the intersections of our narratives and our shared histories, and lift up our collective voice, justice, dignity, and a future that we all belong in. And for all of us Indigenous people, we are still here. We survive. We're strategists, we're doctors, we're organizers naturally, but we are still here. Thank you, Netroots Nation. Good luck this week.
Please welcome the Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams.
Welcome, everyone, to Netroots Nation. I want to open my time here by not mushing over the space that our sister just held, and if we could just take a moment and drop in and reflect on what she asked us to hold while we're here, which is that we have different narratives that intersect with the narratives of the Indigenous people here. And I can say that as a person that hails from stolen people that lives on stolen land. But each of us has a narrative. We have a story, we have a reason that we are here. We have an issue, we have a cause. We are about justice, we are about dignity. But the thing that holds us together, as my t-shirt is saying, is love. That what we are here to do is to weave together our various narratives, the different places that we come from, the different bodies that we are in, the different identities that we inhabit. And I'm so proud of the work that we have done, especially in this last couple of years and in this last year, to make this room look more reflective of the nation that Netroots Nation is a part of. So look around and let's give ourselves some applause for that. And I just want to give a shout out for all the folks that are in this room, because we are coming a very long way from our beginnings. They are good beginnings, but we can always improve on those beginnings. We do good, hard work, and we can always improve on that work. But if we use the weapons of the oppressors, if we use the weapons of a system of oppression, then we will only fortify that system. So I hope that throughout our time here, that we will take the time to reflect, to deepen in, to look around at the physical place that we are at, the city of Philadelphia, and all that it means and all the symbolism that it holds in terms of the beginnings of this country, and reflect on where it is that we come from and what is the lineage of love that we can connect to intersect our stories, to see our stories and the stories of other people, to not just clap at the stories, right? Not just be entertained and wait for my thing to come up, but to realize, where is it that I connect? Where is my history? What is my part? What is the role that I play? And how do I thread that role from the seat of love that I know each and every one of us are coming here from? And too often we put that word aside because we do want justice and we do want dignity and we do want to be advocates and we want to be allies, but we can't do that if we are not allowing our whole selves, our whole lineage, our whole truth to come to the fore and be in the truth with everyone else. Some of us have very difficult truths, and we will get to explore a lot of those difficult truths, just as this nation has very difficult truths. In terms of its inception, the genocide upon peoples and the theft of other peoples, and the continued using of other peoples to bring them into this country and then pit us against each other in a way that cuts us off from the truth of who we actually are. This is a place where we can decide that we are going to put our roots down, that we are going to find our roots in our own connection to our lineage and our lineage of love. So there will be challenging conversations, because that's what happens when you have chosen family. There will be difficulties, and we will have to push up against each other. And maybe there'll be a protest or two, I don't know. But I know that we can do that. I know that we can face all of that with love, with a sense of openness and spaciousness and a willingness to be curious, to hear different ideas, and to figure out, how is it that I can come to this conversation? How is it that I can put aside my sense of fight for the sake of it and show up with love and my whole truth? Because there's room here for all of us. If the indigenous peoples of this land can make room and still hold love and appreciation in the way that our sister did, opening up this space, then we can keep that lineage going and we can hold love in a space of love with each other. If Black folks, having been stolen from their lands, can still hold their head high and be in dignity as they state that Black lives matter, then we can all step in with that sense of love, dignity, respect for one another. Let us show everyone that Netroots Nation is about love and that all of our lineage is love. Thank you so much, and I'll see y'all again soon.
Netroots Nation, let's welcome Arshad Hassan, a principal of Convey Communication and longtime Netroots Nation board member.
Hello. Let's try that again. Hello, Philadelphia. Well, welcome to Philadelphia. Welcome to Netroots Nation. Welcome to, I think it's our 14th annual Netroots Nation. Let's hear it. I love this city. I went to school here, so I love returning every time that I can. I've been waiting for Netroots Nation to come here to Philadelphia, so I have been so pleased to be back here. You know, when I was in college, they first started sort of changing the City of Brotherly Love, the tourism board, into the city that loves you back, which it's cute. I like it. But what I do know, I hope the city has been loving you back. What I do know is that when I walked in up to the registration booth, when I got my badge, which I don't have on me right now, immediately as I saw people I knew, and as I came up to the sort of the booth and everything, I knew that I was going to be in a place where I was surrounded by love, in a place that I knew that I loved and would love me back. So I don't know how true the motto is or what you felt about it, but for Netroots Nation, for me, this is a place that I love and which loves me back. But 14 years of Netroots Nation, our conference is a teenager. I remember when this conference was a baby conference, all the way back in our first one in Las Vegas. And that was a fun time. That was really great, but it's so different. Our conference has grown so much to what we see here today. So I'm going to ask, and I do this every time, one of the great things about growth is all the new things, all the new experiences, the new ideas, and the new people you get to meet as you sort of grow into yourself. So I want to ask you, there's more people than ever, by actually kind of a large margin, than have ever attended this Netroots Nation. And again, one of the big drivers of that was all the new people who are here. So I'm going to ask you, for all of the new people who are here, would you please either stand or raise your arms or make noise or take up space? All of the new people who are here, let's hear it. Let's hear it. Let's see it. Oh my goodness. Look around. Everyone look around. Look at all the new people. Oh, and there's a baby. Oh my goodness! I kind of spied. I think maybe the first timers caucus was live streamed. There were so many people. That's really fantastic. And what I love is when people have a really excellent experience or something that's profound that they've learned from, and they come back again and again and again. So how many people? Same thing. Make noise, take up space, stand up, whatever you want to do. How many people here are back now for the second time? Whoop. Yes, over there. I love it. How about third, fourth, or fifth? How many? How about 6, 7, or 8? 9? Let me know. If you've been a 9, you can remember that. Okay. How many people have been here for 10 or more? That's amazing. I have been here for all 14 Netroots Nations. Weird, perfect attendance. I'm a weird person. But I love it so much. And it's kind of just luck. I don't know. What's this thing? Yearly Coast. What is that? But it's because this experience is profound. I learn so much. I get to connect so much with people. And I get to see amazing speeches by some of the leaders, the leading lights of our organization. And that's what we hope that we bring for you today. Now, this Netroots Nation is our largest Netroots Nation by far. This year, we've already clocked in 3,500 attendees, and people are still registering. They're still coming in. We will be over 3,600 attendees by tomorrow. That is huge. Our largest conference, which is actually just last year, was our largest conference ever, just peaked over 3,000. So this is massive growth for us. This is a huge growth spurt. Like every sort of teenager or teenage age conference, we have these growth spurts and we have these huge sort of moments of learning. So for us, we had 500 submissions come in to talk about all kinds of different issues, including issues we've never talked about. We reduced it down to 120, but we did so with the inclusion of as many different members of as many different communities that make up this diverse movement. 120 people, more than ever, had vetted our different panels, our different submissions, our different trainings to represent all of the different corners, or as many as we could, of our movement and all of the important work that we had and that we have to do. And so we're still learning from that, and we want to be as transparent as possible, and I really respect the words of Angel here previous to me, and that we want to listen, we want to be transparent, and we want to be as inclusive as we can. That's a journey for us. Like I say, we're teenagers and we're sort of in a growth spurt for us, but we're still learning so much. I really want to call your attention to an email that I hope you were able to see. Our executive director, Eric Thutt, sent out an email that laid out the process for picking our panels, that laid out how we represent ourselves up on stage, that laid out how we got to the fact that 79% of our presenters are people of color. 2/3 of our presenters are women, because these are the people who represent the future and the now of the progressive movement. And we want to be transparent with you. We want to listen to your feedback, and we want to include you in all the ways that we can. So we put together an amazing sort of lineup for you today. And we're going to be talking about movement, we're going to be talking about power, we're going to be going beyond just sort of the things that we do in November, but we certainly will be talking about that this election, at this conference. And you'll see quite a bit of that, I think. Today, we're going to hear from some of our movement leaders and strategists, some of the people who really shaped the direction of our future and that have been leading us to the wins that we're going to see this year and next year and the year after. So welcome to Netroots Nation. Welcome to Philadelphia. I hope you enjoy what we have today. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone, please welcome the Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton.
Thank you, Netroots Nation. Most Americans know that Washington, D.C. is the capital of the United States. Most don't know what distinguishes our capital from every other capital in the world and every other part of the United States. Polls show that most Americans believe D.C. residents have the same rights they have in the Congress of the United States. But the residents of your nation's capital have no voting representation in the House or the Senate. The Washington, D.C. Admissions Act, our pending D.C. statehood bill, confers that right on the citizens of the nation's capital by making the District of Columbia the 51st state of the United States of America. The founders went to war for voting rights, not for democracy, not for freedom. Their war slogan was no taxation without representation. Not freedom now, not give me liberty or give me death. It was no taxation without representation, yet the people I represent pay the highest taxes per capita in the United States of America. But they have no right to be represented in the national legislation with a vote. There is no evidence that the founders meant taxation without representation to apply to everyone in the United States except the residents of the capital they themselves created. To the contrary, they modeled their capital on the other capitals they knew, the European capitals. George Washington said that the District of Columbia would be what Paris was to France. Well, the citizens of Paris have always had equal voting rights with other French citizens. The reason the district is controlled by the Congress was the refusal of Pennsylvania to protect Congress itself when the capital was located in Philadelphia. 218 years later, the nation's capital has ample protection with federal and D.C.'s own special forces. But our generation is still confronted with a leftover issue of D.C. residents needlessly left without equal rights in the Senate and the House. The current system denies residents more than 2 senators and a voting House member. It deprives residents of their right to equal citizenship. Only in America do you give up the right to voting representation by moving to the capital, or in my case, being born there. Only in America can you gain the basic citizen right to be represented in the national legislation by moving from the capital. Most fundamental in a democracy is the right to a voice, to be represented when decisions are made about your life. For example, the universal background check just passed the House of Representatives, requiring a background check before you purchase a gun. I could not vote on that bill to protect the nation's visitors to our capital or the people who live there, or on dozens of others that the House has voted on. Today, here at Netroots Nation, I am predicting that H.R. 51, to make the district the 51st state, will pass the House of Representatives this year. The residents of our nation's capital more than meet all the requirements for equal citizenship. That in turn requires voting representation in Congress, more time in the Union than most states, more federal taxes per capita paid than the residents of any state. Time is up. Time for H.R. 51. Time for statehood for the District of Columbia.
Netroots Nation, please welcome Jess Morales-Raqueto.
In El Paso, Texas, 900 people are in a cell meant for 125. In solidarity, please join your fellow Netroots Nation as you feel moved during my speech to join the symbolic cell we have created in the ballroom. I was given a blanket and a mattress, but at 3 a.m. the guards took them. My baby was left sleeping on the floor. Almost every night, the guards wake us at 3 a.m. and take away our sleeping mattresses and blankets. They leave babies, even little babies, of 2 or 3 months, sleeping on the cold floor. For me, because I am so pregnant, sleeping on the floor is very painful for my back and my hips. I think the guards act this way to punish us. That's a testimonial from a 17-year-old girl being held in one of the concentration camps in Texas. A little more than a year ago, on June 30th, 2019, many of you joined Families Belong Together in the streets of more than 700 cities to protest the Trump administration's cruel family separation policy. Together, we forced President Trump to back down and end the zero tolerance policy. But the truth is, family separation never really ended. The Trump administration has taken advantage of the loopholes to continue separating families and lock them up in cages. Women who are pregnant are being forced to sleep on the concrete floor. Premature babies in cages, wrapped in shirts, caked in dirt. There are flu outbreaks, lice outbreaks, toilets out in the open, children denied soap, showers, and toothbrushes, reports about sexual assault, and agents who laugh at children in cages in a secret Facebook group. Jacqueline, Marie, Felipe, Carlos, Wilmer, Juan, and Darylyn are the names of the 7 children who have died in U.S. custody or within hours of being released. Those are just the deaths that we know about. The cruelty is the point. Make no mistake, the Trump administration is committing ethnic cleansing of children and families on our watch. The Trump administration is holding families in concentration camps, and we don't need to debate on what they're called. We need to get them out of the camps. The Trump administration hates immigrants and immigration so much that they have killed children to make an example of them so that they can shut brown and black and AAPI and trans people out of America. Every day, people ask me two questions. How did this happen? And how can I help? How did this happen? These horrors didn't just start happening a month or two ago when the press began paying attention, or even a year ago. They've been happening every single day of the past year and long before that. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface of this monumental moral crisis we are facing on our southern border. It gets worse. I will never forget standing outside of a detention center in over 100-degree heat, watching a bus of children in cages roll by. They put their hands up on the windows as they yelled. As we yelled, "No están solos." You are not alone. I will never, ever forget those little hands. They were so small. The truth is, I have never felt more alone in that moment, because the reality is we have abandoned those children, not just the ones on that bus or even the ones in the last year, but for decades. The progressive movement has ignored these children, their parents, their fathers, and the work of creating an America that respects people who move. I am a fourth-generation American. I am Mexican American, and I am a proud progressive. But I'm not an immigrant. My mother or father aren't immigrants. Like many of you, I have a legacy of immigration in my family, but I've never had to deal with worrying about my papers. And what I've learned over the last month is what people are really asking is, how did this happen? Is, how did I not know about this before? How is this possible? And then they ask, how can I help? Well, I still haven't figured out a low-risk, non-problematic, totally inclusive, easy, portable, visually stunning, media-friendly action that the world can all do on one day. But what I do know is that we won't close concentration camps with symbolic actions. It took a war to close the last ones. All we can do is keep trying again and again and again. All we can do is try. And I have seen what good people can do when they try. I have seen us raise millions of dollars for bonds funds to get out of jail. I have seen us find a sponsor family in 48 hours, and a church stepped up at 0 hour to welcome them into their home and their community. I have seen the courage of Alan Dornan, an 80-year-old man who has walked 2 miles for Dreamers and all immigrants for 560 days and counting in Wethersfield, Connecticut. A few weeks ago, he and his friends, they're 82 and 79, got arrested outside of a federal courthouse. And I have seen moms and grandmas with babies in their laps work the phones to find an apartment for families who've been reunited on a few days' notice. I have seen angels led by Susie Haslett, who became a rapid response travel agency out of an office in DC that brought hundreds of flights for families to be reunited with their families. And I have seen attorneys leave their own babies and sit for hours at the border, waiting with children who are waiting to prosecute their claims for asylum. I have seen hundreds of thousands of people plan and turn out for protests because there is no such thing as other people's children. And I have seen survivors of internment camps. Yes, we should applaud for that. I have seen survivors of internment camps go to detention centers to witness the horrors that they know far too well. Yesterday, Yasmin Juarez testified in front of the US Congress. She's a mother who's been released from detention, and she recounted the slow and painful death of her daughter, who died after being denied medical care by Border Patrol. I have seen pastors get arrested in the Hall of Congress. I have seen bank executives respond to the pressure from organizing led by Moms Rising and others and divest millions of dollars from GEO Group and Civic Corps, the main operators of the private jails where children are kept. And I have seen elected officials like Representative Castro and Senator Booker and Representative Presley and Representative Jayapal visit the camps and sneak cell phone cameras into facilities and escort asylum seekers across a bridge to ensure CPB can't deny them their rights. And yet, even with all of this, migrants are still dying. The camps are still open. And that's because some of us aren't trying. Amazon and Palantir. When a raid happens this weekend, when families are separated and sent to these camps, it will be powered by technology from these companies. You think Wayfair is bad. If you, your company, or your organization uses Amazon Web Services, it's time to make that trend too. To Democratic leadership in Congress and the chairs of the Democratic committees and every single Democrat in the House right now. Tonight, they're going to vote on amendments that will say that our military cannot be used for border enforcement. And many of our so-called Democratic representatives will not vote in favor of making sure that children and their families are not held in military camps. The DCCC, led by Representative Ben Ray Lujan, takes money from the GEO Group and Core Civic and the lobbyists like Aiken Gump who make it possible for them to continue to keep the camps open because it makes them money. We demand that every single dollar from these private detention facilities, from these billionaires, are given back and never taken again. And any Democrat who accepts that money can expect that they will not find themselves representing us anymore. There will be many presidential candidates who will grace this stage this weekend and talk to you about family separation. And to them I say, you must do more than use your rhetoric or speak Spanish to us during debates. You must go to the border, you must force yourself into these camps, and you must make this a priority piece of legislation, not empty promises in your first 100 days of office to ensure that we end family separation and close every single detention center once and for all. And I don't think he's watching, but I really wanted to make sure to take a second also to talk to Stephen Miller, the architect of these immigration policies. We know the significant role you are playing in this nefarious attack on our communities. We see you. We're not afraid of you, and you will not win. To all of you in this room, and allies across the country and the world who are watching, I know that you have donated. I know that you have come out on the streets. I know that some of you have brought families into your homes. I know that you have called Congress, and I am sorry, but I have to ask you to do more. These are concentration camps, and children are dying. Every day that these camps are open, we are feeling down on the job because these children are counting on us to make sacrifices. These children are counting on us to shut down these detention centers. These children are counting on us to make sure that they're reunited with their families. At Netroots Nation, you can go tomorrow and join the action in front of the Berks detention facility, a notoriously bad facility that's just down the street from here. People will be meeting at 11:30 a.m. at the Convention Center's northwest corner on Arch and 12th. And if you can't go tomorrow, or you're not here, you can go to closethecamps.us, There is likely a facility in your community. There is likely a camp in your community. And we need to make those camps ungovernable. We need to make sure they have no choice but to shut them down. And finally, to the immigrants and migrants, and especially the children in detention, no están solos. I hope you'll join me in saying, no están solos. No están solos. No están solos. No están solos. Thank you.
That was powerful. It's powerful. It's powerful not just because it moves us. It's not just powerful because it makes us feel our emotions or it gives us urgency. It's powerful in another way, which Jess was talking about up here. We, as progressives here at Netroots Nation, one of the things I'm very proud of that we do, and I don't always see happening in the political discourse everywhere, is that we engage in the concept of power. The ability to change or keep the same the conditions that we are in right now. But we, progressives, believe that we can do better. We know that the world as it is not the world as it ought to be. So the question is, how do we bridge that gap? The answer is building power. I say the answer is building power like it's something simple to do, but as Jess even pointed out, it's not as simple as the best words and the glossiest messages and whatever else that you want to do. It's something that we have to build over time. It requires us as progressives to really build our connections among people and to build infrastructure for our organizations to connect. It's one of the really amazing things about Netroots Nation, because this is the only forum in the country where progressives come together of this size, of so many different organizations, whether you're an activist or a staffer, whether you're the media or a candidate. We all come together here, connect, and work to build power. What I want to do next is invite one of the most brilliant strategists that we have in our movement. Rashad Robinson is the Executive Director of Color of Change. He's a movement thinker. He's a power builder. Everyone, I'd like you to welcome Rashad Robinson.
How are we doing, everyone? It is an honor to be here with you. Every day at Color of Change, every year, every election, every campaign, we ask ourselves one question. How is what we're doing going to make Black people more powerful? Powerful enough to not just protect ourselves, but to transform this country. Because when Black people are powerful, this country changes. We leap forward. Every dream, every issue in the progressive agenda depends on Black people being in the fight. Being not just present, but powerful. So when I think about the 2020 census and the 2020 election, both of which will shape the reality for decades and beyond that, as a movement overall, we have to get this moment right. Together as progressives, many of us in this room, we have made the Democratic Party a bit nervous about our collective power. And that's a good thing. But we have to use and leverage that to do more than just mobilize voters. We have to mobilize an entire nation to shake up and reshape the way that society works and who it works for. And we will not do that unless we make corporate executives nervous too. So I know that our campaigns, our corporate campaigns at Color of Change are successful when we're making corporate executives nervous. That is how we stopped corporations and companies from enabling white nationalists, both on the streets and those that have infiltrated the administration, from being able to fund them through our No Blood Money campaign. We showed campaigns that they would pay a price. and that we must use and think about the power of corporations to change culture. But there's a lot that we have to remember here. And why is corporate power, why is facing corporate power so important? Because we've got to remember what it's all rooted in. Wall Street was a slave market for Africans and Native Americans before it was a market to sell stocks, bonds, and commodities. The norms of treating people's lives as having greater than others was started long before Donald Trump ever got into office. And the idea remains institutionalized across so many in society. The corporations that fund private prisons, and the climate destroyers, and healthcare deniers, and the media information propagators. For us, A Color of Change is animated in our founding. We were born in the aftermath of a flood that was caused by bad decision makers. Black people were literally on their roofs begging for the government to do something, and they were left to die. But the thing about Katrina wasn't just the flood that took over New Orleans. It was the flood of bad decisions that happened long before and the flood of bad decisions that happened long after, that left so many in pain, that created so much loss. Our founders realized that at that moment, no one was nervous about disappointing Black people. Government, corporations, media, government ignoring us, media calling folks looters and attacking those who were in peril, and corporations fleecing the city and keeping people out of the rebuild. Color of Change was born as a new way to enable everyday people to take action, to translate the analysis and outrage they had into the ability to make real change, to create a less hostile and human world, not just for Black people, but for all people. You know, I would love to say that in the last 14 years since our founding, that things have gotten easier. Bush v. Gore, Citizens United, Shelby, and so many other decisions that have animated taking away the power from progressives and giving new power to the right has made so much of our work harder. All of those things come with the idea that Black people's lives are not as valuable as white folks' lives, and that people of color are expendable in so many ways. We cannot let corporations off the hook for this right-wing takeover. We must hold the enablers accountable. Right now, Color of Change is not just at the table talking to tech companies about their policies and practices. We're also going to shareholder meetings and other places that they see valuable to bring our members' voices to those tables and push for the type of change, not creating a false sense of neutrality around race, but bringing the type of change necessary to move us forward. We cannot fight corporate power in politics only by fighting them in the political realm. We have to build the type of cultural power if we're going to win. But most of all, y'all, we've got to pay attention to culture. We've got to watch TV and pay attention to where people are at. We've got to pay attention to what people are watching in the movies, and we can't think we are better than the people we hope to mobilize and engage. You know, shortly after I started at Color of Change, I launched this campaign to go after this TV star. And, you know, we went after the advertisers. We were outraged by this TV star who was saying racist things and advancing racist narratives. And we got some folks in the room to join us, but most of the people we went to said a number of things to us. They said, you know, we know that corporations are sponsoring this person, but, you know, we don't really do pop culture. We don't, you know, we care about issues and policies. You know, so much of what we think about on the right is, you know, not what's on TV. And so I understand that Color of Change wants to do this campaign, but we're going to stay away from this pop star, this celebrity, this reality show star. And that was a mistake. It was a mistake for many reasons, because when we ignore the ways that culture precedes policy, that culture leads our ability to actually understand how issues are formed and how people get their views, then we make mistakes about not truly understanding where things are going. So the corporation sponsored, and the corporation stayed in, and they sent a powerful, powerful message that it was okay. And in the process, many of us in the progressive movement stood down and did not take that fight. And imagine if we had won. Imagine if we had saw a culture as just as powerful as those issues and those policies. Imagine if we had recognized that we can't allow someone to be on TV once a week and go around the country advancing racist narratives and let corporations who say buy our products and use our services get away with it. Imagine if we had done that work and understood the power of culture, where we might be right now as a movement. Because culture is power. And far too often we give that power away far too cheap. We let corporations join LGBT pride parades while sponsoring candidates and supporting candidates that want to destroy LGBT lives. We let corporations join us for Black History Month celebrations while doing everything to turn back the clock on the victories that Black people have had in this country. Why we talk about Black history in the first place. And we let corporations talk about women empowerment when they care neither about women or empowerment. And we let that happen time and time again. If we don't build the type of infrastructure that thinks as much about culture as we do about politics, we will continue to mistake presence for power and not actually have the change that we need. So how do we do this, y'all? I want to submit to you that we've got to think very clearly about what we center. And for me, I fundamentally believe that racial justice is not charity, it is strategy. Racial justice is the force that not only gets people out of their seats, but gets people to the polls. There is no greater avenue for making change in this country right now than centering racial justice. And I'm not talking about sort of as a side avenue or something we feel like we have to do so we don't get in trouble with the Black and brown people, but seeing it as a force multiplier. Black freedom, freedom for people of color as a force multiplier. When we make change on those issues, we can win on healthcare, we can win on immigration, and we can win on wages and so much more, because the forces that are holding us back understand that they have to stop racial justice in order to win. And a case in point is everything that's happening in cities around the country as people are showing up to the polls to change our criminal justice system, electing district attorneys, showing up to change bail practices, and so much more. These folks are not avoiding the conversation about racial justice, but centering it, leveraging racial justice as the mobilizing force it is to get people out of their seats, to get people engaged and driving people to action. And at the same time, recognizing that we've got to change the story. We've got to recognize that just because we say something over and over again doesn't mean that people understand it. So this slide right here shows basically that for the last 20 years in this country, violent crime has steadily went down. But if you ask most Americans, they think violent crime has gone up. So your talking points and op-ed pieces are not going to change this. They just won't. If we are not thinking very clearly about the avenues by which people are getting their information, developing their opinions, because this chart is not a mistake. This chart represents the strategies of our opponents from Hollywood to Washington, who have made investments in keeping the profiteers of the criminal justice system in place, of ensuring that we fund more police in schools rather than teachers and counselors, that we fund more prisons instead of more hospitals and mental health, that the investments and the money go certain places than others. So when people think about what they need to solve, they have a different perception than the actual reality. But I do believe that we are winning. I believe we are winning all around the country. And I think that the folks in Philadelphia are a perfect example. Groups like the Philadelphia Community Bail Project, Media Mobilizing Project, the Reclaim Philly, Power, Frontline Dads, and so many more are part of a movement of folks that are working not only to push for change at the ballot box and in communities, but also fighting back against the attacks. We at Color of Change are working across Hollywood to change the story about race and crime in people's minds, and also working to bring people together into community, to break past the transactional way that we engage people and move to more transactional ways, bringing people together in brunches and conversations, helping people see themselves as collectively together, and then thinking about how they want to win justice together. And thinking about the range of issues that we can work on to build, but thinking about what does it mean to be in community first and build towards issue second, being able to see each other and work with one another. So I want to end on a couple of points. The first is that we've got some things that I believe we've got to do from a strategy perspective. There's some things that I know that we've got to do if we're going to win not just elections, but win the type of changes that make people's lives better. First, we've got to strengthen movement organizations, because this is not just about giving politicians jobs. This is about making people's lives fundamentally better. And if we are not investing in local organizations and national organizations and regional organizations, we will not have the infrastructure necessary. This is not about electing another Messiah, but about building collective power for real people and real communities that can bring about real change. And we've got to invest in people, and this is not just getting more volunteers to follow the direction of their campaign staff. This is about giving people in motion and bringing them together in ways that allow them to see themselves as powerful too. We've got to center racial justice and make sure that we recognize that racial justice wins. And I'm not just talking about making sure that racial justice is present in your talking points about climate change. I am talking about making sure that racial justice is a strategy for gaining power and winning power, recognizing that people can come first to opening up the planet, and so much more. Recognizing that racial justice isn't charity, but racial justice is strategy. And finally, we've got to work to not just get our story out, but to get our story in. And what I mean by that is we have to work to embed our stories in the hearts and minds of everyday people. And that means focusing on narrative infrastructure, changing the rules of news and Hollywood and all the places where people actually get their information, are informed by how the world moves. We have to recognize that our talking points alone will not change the embedded perceptions people have about our communities, but our ability to engage in the ways that people actually get information has the power to. And finally, I'm going to end where sort of I began. These are my maternal grandparents, Charlie and Matilda Trent. They're in my mom's garden on Eastern Long Island. They are no longer with us. My grandparents came to Eastern Long Island as part of the Great Migration in the 30s. From the farm fields of Virginia, the pain, the segregation, and the violence of the South, to the pain, the segregation, and the violence of the North. And they got there, and they faced all of the issues that we talk about and will have panels about here at this conference. The issues of geographic segregation and redlining, the issues of police violence and criminal justice, the issues of job security. I think about what it meant for my grandmother to have to show up for everybody else first and never have to show up for herself. I think about them a lot, not because I'm making a point about Black pain and Black struggle. I want to make a point about joy, because that's also what they had. They had joy because they recognized that there was something aspirational in a fight for a better day. My grandfather used to bring me into the voting booth and put me on his shoulder and let me pull the lever, and we would sometimes read out the names. And I didn't find out till after my grandfather died that he actually couldn't read or write. He never got a formal education. But every single day, he wanted to participate. He wanted to engage, whether it was in his church or community group or with his family, and believe that there was a better tomorrow that was there. I stand up here, and so many of us are in this room, because there are people who came before us. I stand here before as the Black gay leader of a next generation racial justice organization with one of the fiercest staffs that this movement knows, and 1.5 million members that drives our everyday work, because there were people who had joy, that were willing to pick up voting cards when people said that they couldn't. That there were people that were willing to pick up union cards when they said that they shouldn't. There were people who were willing to pick up rocks to start new movements and willing to pick up picket signs and protest. And all of those people helped to reshape the society we live in today and work for a better tomorrow. Because when we recognize that we all exist, when we all matter, then we will not just talk about the vision for a better tomorrow, but we will pair that vision with the type of infrastructure and strategy that actually leads towards real change. Because it's not enough to have a list of issues if we don't have joy and the infrastructure to deliver on it. If we don't have the ability to translate presence into power, we will never make justice real. But I believe that we can win, and every single day there are signs of it in local communities and national communities. So if we have the ability and the fight and the focus, let us stand up and continue to work together, because it's not just about 2020. It's about our fight for a future where all of us can be heard, counted, and visible, regardless of whether we are privileged or vulnerable, in the majority or the minority, or in favor or out of favor with whoever is in power. That is how we win, my friends. Thank you all very much.
Netroots Nation, please welcome the International President of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, Sarah Nelson.
Hey, Netroots Nation! What a feeling being here. Now I want to hear from you. Where did you travel from? Tell me. Let me hear it one more time. All right. This is where change makers come to feel connected, recharged, define what's at stake, and what we can do to fix it. This conference is living and breathing solidarity, and I am all in for it. And for my CWA sisters and brothers in the room, it's Thursday and we wear red. We honor the blood that's been spilled on the picket line and the blood that we share as a union family. I know the power of solidarity because I've lived it. As a brand new flight attendant at United Airlines, the company failed to pay me. With a balance of zero in my bank account and no idea how I could even eat that day, I went down to the airline office and asked why I hadn't been paid and what was going on. They had no answers, and for the first time, I felt like I was just a number in an HR file. The tears started to roll when I felt a tap on the shoulder, and that changed everything. I turned around and saw someone standing there who looked a lot like me. She was wearing the same uniform anyway. Otherwise, I'd never seen her before. She's holding her checkbook and asking me how to spell my name. She hands me a check for $800, and she says, number one, you go take care of yourself. And number two, call our union. I did call our union, and I had my paycheck the next day. And that's when I learned the power of being a part of a union. They fought for me in a way that I couldn't fight for myself. I learned that in our union, we're never alone. The Association of Flight Attendants was formed to beat back discrimination that ranged from quitting at age 30 or stepping on a weight scale until 1993. The great labor leader, Mother Jones, said, the aristocrat gang of thieves made the ladies, but God Almighty made women. So flight attendants, 80% organized, claimed our place as women. and even fought to make sure that men could have the same rights as us on the job. And we were at the forefront of LGBTQ rights because it doesn't matter who you love, it only matters that you love. And that is the spirit that led flight attendants to take on big tobacco and win, and it's the spirit that led flight attendants to declare we wouldn't work flights that facilitated the administration's evil policy of family separations. And it's the spirit that mobilized action with many of you right here in this room. We took action together against ICE detention of one of my members who was a dreamer, winning her release within 18 hours of coming to our attention. And it's that spirit that allowed us to take a firm stand during the government shutdown. Just 5 years after I started my flying career, the events of September 11th, 2001 changed everything. I had frequently worked Flight 175, the plane you can picture hitting the South Tower of the World Trade Center, because that's the image captured from so many angles after American Flight 11 had struck the North Tower 17 minutes earlier. That could have been me, but instead it was my friends, Amy, Michael, Robert, Catherine, Al, Alicia, Amy, Jesus, and Marianne. Even as we grieved, over 100,000 aviation workers lost jobs nearly overnight, and then the bankruptcies came. I was our communications chairperson, still in my 20s, working around the clock to communicate new procedures, but mostly repeatedly bad news. I remember a day in the office about 6 months into the 38-month bankruptcy when our union president called me to tell me, and we already had 7,000 on furlough. United just called to tell me they are furloughing another 1,500 flight attendants. It all became too much, and in that moment I told him I just needed to cry. I did. I knew in that moment how I was going to spend the rest of my life. We would have to fight like hell to hang on to everything we could so we could live to fight another day, to fight for the people, and the people that I knew and knew what they deserved. And all too often, workers feel overwhelmed and powerless and desperate. But in my union, I had hope. As a group, we fought on when everything was stacked against us: bankruptcy, Wall Street, Congress, and the White House. And we made a difference. They had all the power, but because we had our union, we actually had a way to fight back. They stole our pensions. When $80 million would have saved them, the court granted termination with one hammer of the gavel, and in the next awarded $400 million in bonuses to the top executives. But we fought back, and because we fought, we doubled the amount they planned to pay for a pension replacement plan. Mother Jones tells us, you will fight and win. You will fight and lose. But above all, you must fight. Unions create consistent structure for working people to fight back. We also keep the fight grounded, directly connected to what people know and feel. I want to summon in your mind's eye the faces of all the people who walked the picket line this past year. So picture them. West Virginia's teachers and their mine worker parents and grandparents. Grocery workers in Boston, hotel workers in Chicago, Google engineers in San Francisco, and Uber drivers in LA. And you can join Kat Payne, who is a worker right here in Philadelphia at Marriott's Hotel tomorrow. They are fighting for their union under terrible anti-union busting. And you can make a show of solidarity with those workers at the Marriott Philadelphia Downtown Hotel. Meet tomorrow at 1 p.m. outside the registration booth at the corner of Broad and Race. We'll see you there. All of these fights matter. We're connected. We have to recognize our power comes from the ground, not on high. When the teachers of West Virginia were grappling with whether or not to strike, the bus drivers told them, "We've got your back. Not a single bus will drive students to school." Too often, we don't understand our own power. But look around. It's all of us, together. People think power is a limited resource, but using power builds power. And once workers get a taste of our power, we will not settle for a bad deal, and we won't stand by while someone else gets screwed either. That's what happened during the government shutdown. It was a humanitarian crisis with 800,000 federal sisters and brothers who were either locked out or forced to work without pay. And another 1 million people doing contract work, locked out without any warning. Only because of our unions, we heard the story of real people. During the shutdown, agencies were handed down memos from the White House to tell federal workers they were forbidden from speaking up to anyone about how they were faring during the shutdown. AFGE and other federal sector unions put a stop to that and made sure people could express the personal hardship they were forced to face. Federal workers were suddenly no longer nameless, faceless bureaucrats. The stories made them human to the public. No money for rent, for childcare, or a tank of gas to get to work. The federal worker stretching insulin through the night and wondering if she will wake up in the morning. The transportation security officer in her 3rd trimester with no certainty for her unborn child. The air traffic controller who whispered to his union officer, "I just don't know how long I can hang on." The TSA officer in Orlando who took his life by jumping 8 floors to his death in the middle of the security checkpoint. For those of us in aviation, the truth is that if our federal sector sisters and brothers can't do their work, we can't do ours. We are connected. We had to define what was at stake and understand our leverage to fix it. And we said it was time to call for a general strike. But we have to understand that the strike is the tactic. Our solidarity is the power. Calling for a general strike first and foremost made clear who had the power. When it seemed there was no answer and no end in sight, labor led the way. The shutdown ended not so much because a few grounded flights in LaGuardia, but because those 10 air traffic controllers who couldn't safely do their jobs any longer signaled a much more powerful threat to the GOP. Labor was rising, and the very last thing they could allow to happen in this process was to let us taste our power. They saw that they nearly lost everything because we were about to expose the facade that they are the ones in control. Some thought the shutdown was about a wall. If you were looking on social media or network news, it appeared that the wall was already built as the country seemed bitterly at odds over racist fear-mongering. But it was all a lie. I spoke with transportation security officers who told me that if it weren't for the stress of not getting a paycheck, they'd never been happier at work. Normally, the security checkpoints are less than pleasant, but instead of grouching during screening, people said thank you. They were kind. They offered help. Most people want to choose kindness. We pull together when things get bad. I saw it after 9/11, and I saw it during the shutdown. Americans like to feel solidarity. The public had to face people hurting in their everyday life, and that built solidarity, a force stronger than gravity. Our lives and our well-being are completely tied together with workers in Mexico, Canada, China, and Germany. Yet politicians in every country seek to divide us, pit us against each other. We as a movement are not automatically on the right side. We have to choose to be. We have to live that choice. I learned the hard way at the bargaining table with some of the world's most powerful corporations, stacked even with the power of the bankruptcy court, that solidarity and the courage of working people is the greatest force for good in human history. So Netroots Nation, let's use it. Spread the word that the labor movement belongs to all working people. Women, people of color, young people, join unions, run unions. We need your vision, your passion, your creativity, your leadership. So say it with me. Unions belong to all working people. If we understand this, we can change the world. With our unions, we have equal standing with owners. Women have equal pay. We have a voice, a means to drive change. We can't wait for someone else to save us. Netroots, help spread the word that unions are here for everyone. If you're done with poverty, build your union. If you're sick and tired of pension defaults for Main Street and stock buybacks for Wall Street, build your union. If you want for yourself what you're willing to want for someone else, even if they're different from you. Build your union. If you want to raise the minimum wage so we can raise the roof, build your union. If you know that our freedom depends on human rights for all, build your union. We don't have to wait for the next election when we have a union. The power of solidarity gets results right away. In our union, we can define what's at stake, recognize racism and sexism and every ism as the boss's tactics, rather than our brothers and sisters' hearts. Change comes fast when risk becomes too great for those in power. And power shifts to people when we act in unity. So finally, look to the people all around you and tell everyone, I've got your back. I've got your back. I've got your back. Right on, Netroots Nation. Thank you.
Netroots Nation, let's welcome Kat Payne, Philadelphia Marriott worker.
I'm sure everyone heard that message that came across on their phones. So you know what that's telling us. We are the thunder. Right? We are the flood warning. When we first started this movement, I'm Catherine Payne. They call me Kat Payne. I would like to welcome you to Philadelphia. But now I think I'm welcoming a storm of people that's about to flood this town and my hotel, the Philadelphia Marriott downtown. I am a non-union worker. I'm fighting for a fair process for my coworkers and I to form a union. I'd like to thank Reverend Holston for his leadership today and over the past several years. They inspire me to keep fighting. It's a long but worthwhile struggle. On behalf of all the housekeepers, the housemen, the bell staff, the front desk, the waitresses, waiters, dishwashers, line cooks, all of the workers in Philadelphia's hospitality industry, we welcome this storm to Philadelphia. We are the often silent and invisible army that makes this city thrive. Hospitality is the fastest growing industry in the city. Most of the hospitality workers are women. We're immigrants. We're Black, Asian, and Latino. We have people from all walks of life. We're a hardworking town. We've got grit, we've got history, we've got tradition. We're proud and we're tough. We're the city of Rocky. We're a city of single mothers like me working hard to take care of our families. But we're also the poorest big city in the country. 44% of single mothers in Philadelphia are living below the poverty line. So how do we change that? My union, Unite Here, is leading the fight to say that one job should be enough. Right now, I work 2 jobs. I'm a housekeeper at Marriott during the day and a bartender at night. Marriott is the biggest hotel company in the world, yet so many of us are struggling day to day to make ends meet. We're living paycheck to paycheck, doing back-breaking work, and we're working multiple hours and multiple jobs and long hours. And the company has incentives like the Green Choice program that makes our jobs even harder. Under the guise of helping the environment, the Marriott offers incentives for guests to turn down housekeeping services, which makes the rooms even more difficult to clean when you check out. When I see those Green Choice cards, it's like a nightmare, because that means that I can't go home until I'm done with my rooms, which means less time with my families, to talk with my children. I get home exhausted and go straight to bed, so I can get up and go to work the next day to do it all over again. There are real steps that Marriott can do to build a better Green Choice program into its business. Cutting housekeeper hours and breaking our backs is not an option. That is why last year, thousands of Marriott workers took the brave step of going on strike to change their working conditions and to give hotel workers a better life. I recently met Louise Brown, a woman who started fighting to establish a union as a nurse in 1969. She and her co-workers not only stood up to their management, but to the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, and the National Guard. They didn't let what happened to Martin Luther King stop them. They used it to inspire them to continue his dream. I am following in her footsteps today. There is a revolution in every generation. Ours is now. I am a proud revolutionary. My afro and my flower is my helmet. My gloves are my gauntlet. My uniform is my suit of armor. My tongue is my sword for justice. I am proud to be sharing this historic moment with you all. Let's make history together. I would like to introduce an exceptional, unmovable force in the progressive movement of working families, single mothers, the less fortunate, Reverend Gregory Holston, who's the Executive Director of Power. Thank you.
My name again is Reverend Gregory Holston, the Executive Director of Power. Power is 83 congregations, working with another 40 congregations across the city of Philadelphia and the surrounding counties, and now in the center of Pennsylvania, building communities of opportunity to work for all. We are Muslim, Jewish, Christian, and humanists. We are Black, Latino, and white. We are urban, rural, and suburban. We are power, and we are believing in that power for change in our state and in our country. I am proud to be a part of this organization that has won victories in this city. 4,000 airport workers, some making as little as $2.50 an hour, who are now making $15 and have a union and have benefits and have a different and a better life because of our work together with unions like SEIU and Unite Here. I'm proud to say also that as a part of an education coalition, we raised $600 million more for education across the state of Pennsylvania, and also passed a fair funding formula for our schools. I'm excited also because there is the truth about Philadelphia. It is ground zero for real criminal justice reform, and I'm proud to stand with those who are fighting that fight together, like Reclaim Philadelphia, Media Mobilizing, a 215 PA Alliance, who are believing together that we can create change like any other change in this nation. When we stand together, we can change our systems and we can end mass incarceration, where we can do it together. We have reduced the prison population in this city from 6,500 a year ago down to 4,700, almost a 25% decrease in the prison population in this city, because Black and white and Latino stood together to make that change. And so with all these incredible changes and a real Philadelphia movement that is happening in this city, I still am aware that our city is still the poorest big city in the country. It still has a 26% poverty rate, which is about 400,000 people in this city living in poverty. It still has 14% of the people living in deep poverty. That's about 200,000 people making as individuals somewhere around $5,500, $5,600 a year. That's a little more than $100 a week. Not far from here in North Philadelphia, there are zip codes where the poverty rate is 60% and the unemployment rate is 50%. And the thing about this is that for the last 50 to 60 years, people who have called themselves progressive have run this city. But there has been no change in the lives of those that I've just spoken about in North Philadelphia. The manufacturing plants that were there in the 1960s, those plants that went first to the suburbs and then to the south and then outside of this nation, and now those jobs don't even exist because of technology. There was never any industry that came back to really replace those jobs, and the people there have suffered with the promises of politicians over and over and over again that change would come, and change has not come for their lives. And so the question becomes, who are the real progressives? Who are the people that are really going to stand up and really create the kind of progress? Because you can't call yourself a progressive if the situations have still remained over the years, because progressive in the root word has progress, and if we're not making any progress, then you can't be a progressive. The truth of the matter is that we can't make progress because we don't attack the real issue. That we really don't go after what the real situation is. That we really don't understand that the depth of racism and how it affects our nation. We try to win this issue or that issue or that issue, and we're frustrated over and over because we're not attacking the underlying racism that is affecting all of the issues that we care about. We cannot win on those issues unless we build a real black and Latino and working class white folk coalition that can stand together and build together and create together the kind of world that we really want. And so we have to deal with this unholy alliance that occurred and is rooted in America. An unholy alliance between the white elite and the white working class that is rooted in the very structure of every business and every industry that we have. That goes as far back before America was created, when black and white used to work together and to go against those who were the elite class. But the elite made a promise: I'll treat you just a little bit better than black folk. I'll treat you give you just a little bit more in the structure. I'll just give you just a little more money. I'll keep most of the money for myself, but I'll keep just a little bit more for you and allow you to treat black people in this nation less than human. And by doing that, create an alliance that defined what white people were. I looked across the world and I recognized that the phrase white, that there is no white land anywhere. Look on the map. Most people identify themselves by the nation that they come from. They are Italian descent or Irish descent or German descent or Spanish descent, by the nation they came from. Where is white land? It was made up, it was created to be able to connect with the poor white working class, the poor white indentured servants, and a promise was made with that creation of what we call today white people. And that promise was, I will always treat you above the black person. And so throughout all of the systems that we look at throughout our society, you always see a racial disparity everywhere you go. Whether you're talking education, whether you're talking economic justice, whether you're talking criminal justice reform, whether you're talking climate justice, right there in the midst of all of it is always an underlying racial disparity, because from the beginning of this country, there was a promise that black people would be treated less than human, and that promise is still being kept. Still being kept. Still being kept. Still being kept. And and so when we stand here at these places, we don't realize that the one fight we really all have, that with all the issues and organizing we do, all of the stuff that we say we care about, until we see all of ourselves really as anti-racism organizers, until we see that the issue that we're fighting on is not really the main issue, but the main issue underlying is the racism that keeps those institutions and keeps the profit coming and keeps those people oppressed, until we see that racism is at the very core of everything we care about, we cannot win. And that's tough, because you got to look at yourself, and you got to look at the people that you're organizing, and you got to challenge them on the white privilege that they may have. I'll give you an example quickly. We were involved in a great education campaign. I just told you $600 million and fair funding formula. But when we started to sit down and say, okay, we recognize that they're not going to put all of the money, the basic education money, into the formula. And we need to declare that all 100% go into the formula, because that's the way we can get a fair share of dollars for black and brown children in Pennsylvania. But it meant going to white districts who get more than their fair share and have gotten more than their fair share, not for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, but for the history of the Commonwealth, they always got more than their fair share. And so it meant looking at our white colleagues who were organizing and saying, yes, you got to go back and tell them the only way we're all going to win and we're all going to come up higher and we're all going to raise more money together for more education together is if they don't recognize they've been getting more than their fair share, and we now got to have equality for everyone. Until you're willing to do that, in all of the places, in all the tough conversations, dealing with the white privilege that is there that made it just a little bit better, but to recognize if you give up just what a little bit better, we can all work together to get a whole lot better, because I guarantee you the 1% who controls 42% of the wealth of this nation, they have more than enough to give all of us everything we need. And if we can band together and build together and stand together, we can create the kind of world we're looking for. So I need some real progressives. I need some real progressives that will say that will understand that when you talk about economic justice and you talk about the 1%, but you don't talk about the justice for the ancestors of the 10 million African slaves who gave 300 years of economic worth to this nation, and you don't want to talk about reparations, then you're not a real progressive. Don't call yourself a progressive if you understand that mass incarceration over the last 50 years was another kind of slavery. If you're not willing to stand up and say not only does every record need to be expunged, but all of the back wages need to come back to the people who have been prosecuted for these years against the justice that we need. We don't call yourself a real progressive if you don't understand that climate justice is not just what's happening to our nation, what's happening to our world, but climate justice has been happening, injustice has been happening to black and brown people from the beginning of time, and that they're poisoning our children, they're poisoning our community, the refineries and the plants that exist are poisoning all of us until you stand up for black and brown children that got asthma, and black and brown people that got cancers, and black and brown people who are hurting today. You're not really fighting for climate justice. So let me close by saying I'm looking for a movement. I'm looking for a movement for real change. I'm not looking for the fake change anymore, that we talk to each other and we rally together in our cocktail parties about what victory we won today, when we know that incremental change is really not changing the lives of anybody. I'm looking for a movement that believes that we can really change and transform our nation and systematically strip down and dismantle racism at its very core. I'm looking for a movement that believes in a representative democracy, that everyone's vote counts, and if anybody's vote is not being counted, we need to stand up together and fight to every part of voter suppression that continues to tear us apart. I'm looking for a movement that believes that we should have the right to affordable housing, a right to Medicare for all, a right to quality education for all, a movement that believes that we should have full employment for everybody who wants it, and believes that we should have a living wage for everybody, and even believes that we should have a guaranteed income for every individual in America. We have the wealth, we have the power, we can do it. Why don't we take care of everybody in this country? I'm looking for a movement that believes that we can hope together and dream together and stand together and believe that we can create the world we're looking for. Not just a world that is protected against the climate injustices that are happening right now, but a world of a beloved people, where we stand together in that beloved world and we love one another, and we believe that actually for the equality of each and every individual, and affirm the humanity of every individual, no matter what their faith, no matter what their nationality, no matter what their sexual preference, no matter who they are, that we believe that you all have worth, that you all have humanity, and we can stand and build that world together. I'm looking for a movement. I don't know about you, but I believe the movement can start today, and start with us if we're willing to stand together. Are you willing to do that today? Are you willing to stand today? Are you willing to dream today? Are you willing to be a real progressive today? Are you believing that you can make the difference? If you do, stand on your feet and say, yes, today I believe in the movement for change. I believe that we can win.
It's amazing. I believe. Do you hear that? Do you hear that? That is the sound of Mother Nature herself, clapping and snapping and stomping and endorsing the Reverend right here. Be careful out there. It is storming. I have a couple things for you. I have your keynote speaker for tonight, but I have an announcement first. So I have been kind of sneaking around the sides, sort of looking around, looking back. There are people, obviously here, all the way back to the end of the room. It's because we have so many people who are coming to this Netroots. 3,500 people. We've never filled out a room like this. So congratulations. This is really great. Now, Yes, it's great. So a lot of you made your sort of reservation, or you bought your ticket kind of at the last minute. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people bought their tickets in the last few days, actually. So my announcement for you is your opportunity to do even better and plan ahead. So it is kind of hard to get the hotel rooms when they've all sold out. The Marriott is all sold out, for example. And it is hard when, you've got to get all the seats. So I want you to get the best rates possible. And you do that for coming to next year. If this year is good, if you already know this year is good, I'm going to tell you that next year is going to be, I'm going to say it again. I'm going to say one more time, or many more times, hopefully, that this is the best Netroots Nation ever, Netroots Nation 15, biggest ever, because it's been true every year. Do you want to do that? Do you want to sign up for the next Netroots? Yeah, I'm already going. It's great. Okay, well, I'm going to tell you where the next Netroots Nation is. I want to invite you to come get high with me in Denver. It's altitude. Altitude. It's really high, up to 5,280 feet. You have to hydrate. It's not the oxygen. I'm obviously talking about altitude. So next year, Netroots Nation 2020 will be in Denver, Colorado. Over the past 14 Netroots, we have been to cities all over this country. The last couple cities we went to were 2 cities located in different parts of the South because it is important to organize there. Now we're going to the Mountain West because it is important to organize there. We're going to a place, Colorado, where progressives have organized and built infrastructure and have begun to turn the state bluer and bluer and bluer. It is a swing state, but we have been working to winning in that state. This last year we elected the nation's first gay governor, which that's amazing to me. A former speaker here at Netroots Nation, Governor Jared Polis. So we are going to show up. I want you to buy your tickets. I want you to get there early. And now you know, it's in Denver, 5,280 feet up. So I can't wait. I'm excited, but I can't wait a little bit more because we have an exciting speaker coming up next. Our next speaker, Alicia Garza, has changed all of us. She's a writer, she's an activist, and she's a co-founder of Black Lives Matter. She has changed the discourse of this country, the politics of this country. She has built power through her actions. She's changed us here at Netroots Nation. She's left an indelible mark right here with us and with progressives and with the country all over this country, and has led for a vision to the future. So I'm excited to introduce to you Alicia Garza, founder of Black Lives Matter.
What's good, Philadelphia? Let's try that again. What's good, Philadelphia? My name is Alicia Garza, and I believe that Black people deserve to be powerful in every aspect of our lives, and politics should be no exception. In 2018, I launched a new organization called the Black Futures Lab, which works to make Black communities powerful in politics. You see, I've been an organizer for nearly 20 years, first with Black communities in East and West Oakland in California. Yeah, represent Oakland. Then for 10 years with Black communities in Bayview Hunters Point in the southeast section of San Francisco, taking on one of the largest developers in the nation. 6 years ago this week, I helped to create the Black Lives Matter Global Network, which began as a hashtag and a series of pages on social media sites, and then grew into a network with nearly 40 chapters in 4 countries. I've helped to create a program called We Dream in Black, the first organizing program at the National Domestic Workers Alliance that is focused specifically on Black domestic workers coming together across the diaspora to change the industry that cares for the people that we care for the most. We Dream in Black is now organizing Black domestic workers in 4 states across the nation, including North Carolina, Georgia, New York, and Washington State. I feel good about these things. And I've spent nearly 20 years building power with Black communities all over the country, and so I can tell you that one thing remains true. Black communities are regularly left out of the progressive movement, and this is to our own peril. You see, 2020 is coming, and the only path to victory for the progressive movement is to ensure that the new American majority is activated, engaged, but also to make sure that our votes are protected and counted. Now, every year I say the same thing, and every year I am disappointed but not surprised. Inside of our movement, Black communities are often seen as window dressing. We look great in ads and brochures. Maybe there's a few of us in incredible organizations, but do our issues and our needs factor in to the agendas and the campaigns that we are moving? You see, for too long, our progressive movement has been engaging Black people, Black communities, and our concerns, our dreams, symbolically, but not substantively. Frankly, for too long, progressives have even adopted conservative talking points when it comes to race, claiming that identity politics, a gift that was given to our communities by the insurmountable Black lesbian feminist Barbara Smith, identity politics, we say sometimes, are dividing us. And yet, if we're really being honest, what is truly dividing us is our inability to look squarely in the face at the impacts of white supremacy and an unfair, inhumane economic system, and then commit to ridding ourselves of that misery once and for all. My organization, the Black Futures Lab, conducted the Black Census. It is the largest survey of Black communities in America in 154 years. Yeah, it's amazing. You can find the results at blackfutureslab.org. But before I tell you what we found, I want to tell you why we embarked on this project. You see, in the last election cycle in my home state of California, our state Democratic Party reportedly raised $30 million. But yet a mere $50,000 went to Black voter engagement. You see, just like Black Lives Matter, everybody loves Black women when it comes to elections. Just look at the victories that are attributed to us in Alabama and Virginia, Georgia and Florida. And yes, I'm claiming Georgia and Florida because we won those elections. It's just that voter fraud kept the winner from assuming office. So just like Black Lives Matter, we say that we love Black communities, but how much of our resources are being directed towards investing in organizations and efforts that are mobilizing and activating Black communities? You see, we embarked on this project because we want the concerns, the issues that are impacting Black communities to be made much more visible. We embarked on this project because we've known for a long time now that nobody is coming to save us. We embarked on this project because we know that the concerns of Black communities deserve attention, and our communities deserve to be powerful in the democracy that we are called upon to save time and time again because of the poor decisions that we make under white supremacy and patriarchy. Time and time again, Black communities are engaged symbolically, but we are not engaged substantively. That means that candidates, campaigns, and at times even our own movement take shortcuts when it comes to Black communities, and I'm here to tell you that we are suffering because of it. Thank you. Now, with respect to candidates and their campaigns, many of whom will be there this weekend, there are too many fried chicken photo ops and not enough town halls and kitchen table conversations with Black voters who want to know not only what will you do to address our concerns, but how will you involve us in the process? And too many of us are providing cover for this kind of nonsense. I once name-checked a candidate for engaging in such pandering, and somebody responded to me incredulously, well, what else are campaigns supposed to do to engage African American voters? I rest my case. What we found was that Black communities are being impacted by the same issues that many in America are being impacted by, but that the scale and the scope of that impact cuts deeper because of race, because of gender, because of sexuality. You know, those pesky identities we keep talking about are things that not only shape our lives, but also our life outcomes. You see, when you tell Black people to stop talking about identity politics, you are also telling us that we should ignore the fact that the average life expectancy of a Black trans woman is 35 years old, in a year when nearly 10 Black trans women were murdered in just 1 month. When you tell Black people to stop talking about identity politics, you are telling us to ignore the fact that white women make 81 cents to every dollar that a white man makes. But even still, Black women are making 65 cents to that 81 cents. And that gap is often the difference between whether or not we can afford health care. When you tell us to stop talking about identity politics, you are telling us to ignore the fact that for a Black family to send their child to a 4-year college, we would have to make, on average, $10,000 more a year just to afford 1 year of college. In 2016, Black people with a college degree had less wealth than a white person without one. So please, stop telling us to abandon identity politics and instead do the work to dismantle the disparities. In our survey, we found that the #1 issue for the communities that we surveyed was that wages were too low to support a family. 9 in 10 respondents said that this was a major concern. 85% of Black Census Project respondents supported raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour in order to deal with that problem. 86% of Black Census respondents said that the lack of affordable health care was a major problem. And 90% believe that it is the role of government to provide health care for all Americans. So, my message for our movement is this. Instead of using us as window dressing, consider that Black communities are the portal to the future, and as a movement, we get to decide whether we are the canaries in the coal mine or whether we are unlocking together the future that we deserve. We found that Black communities want the same things that most of America wants: safety, security, dignity. And yet we still cannot say with any level of certainty that America wants those things for Black communities. We talked with more than 30,000 Black people across this nation. Black folks who are liberal, conservative, Black people who are rural and urban, Black folks who are lesbian and gay, bisexual, transgender, gender nonconforming, cisgender, and heterosexual. We talked to Black people who are currently incarcerated and formerly incarcerated. We talked to Black people who were born here and Black people who migrated here to find a better life. And the most common thing that we heard from participants in our census was that no one has ever asked them what it is that we want for our futures. That does not bode well for a movement that plans to win in 2020. And in fact, that needs us in order to win. The 2020 election might be one of the most important elections of my lifetime, of our lifetimes, because it may be the dividing line between the potential of democracy and the certainty of authoritarianism. It is an election that cannot be won by playing it safe or playing to the middle, because the current administration has stripped the middle of all meaning. It is an election that cannot be won by pretending that there is not a white supremacist and a rapist at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. This election can only be won if no one is left behind, and democracy can only be realized if everyone gets to participate. So please, let us push our candidates, our campaigns, and even our movements to do more than take photos with Black people. More is possible when we do better by all of us. Thank you.
Hi. I gotta ask you to get up and move over there so we can hear you above the thunder that you have created in here.
Oh, yes, here. Hello.
All right, so are y'all feeling jealous, like some FOMO over here? I get to have a conversation with Alicia, and I want to start with asking you some quick questions about the census, because you really brought up important issues, and I know that when you got to the last thing and said that, you know, the thing that people mostly said is nobody ever asked us, I really felt that, because I feel that all my life, that, you know, we're always asked to respond to other people's issues. One of the things I'm curious about is, what do you say to folks that aren't Black, that white folks that are like, well, are we supposed to just put Black people's issues ahead of us, or Black people's needs ahead of us and sit on the sideline, or should we just get behind Black people and disappear? What would you say to those folks?
All right, I'm going to answer this question. Black people's issues are your issues too. And I'm like,
Can we say that again?
Black people's issues are your issues too. And as long as we keep kind of doing this thing where we're like, well, I'm going to be in solidarity with Black people, and I want Black people to have luck with their movement, but that's not my movement, we're not going to win. We're just not going to win. So the majority of us in this country are struggling from a lack of access to the things that we need. But what we're advocating for here is not just to use white experience as the control by which we shape our campaigns, by which we understand our data and our statistics, and certainly by which we shape our outreach plans to get people activated and involved. We already saw that that was a losing strategy in 2016, and if we continue to do that in 2020, we will definitely see Trump in the White House for another few years.
So what can, for instance, we have all these candidates that are coming, what can they do to use the census in order to inform their campaigns and actually be able to speak to Black people and all people in a way that's actually meaningful?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing they can do is actually use the census to shape their policy agendas. We have done the work of talking to tens of thousands of Black people across the nation about what it is that we are experiencing in our economy, in our democracy, in our society. And so we're offering the information, but we're also going to be offering a policy agenda, because what we know that we need to be analyzing candidates by is how close they are to our values, but also how closely they align to the agenda that we want to see them move. And we have to stop using candidates, using the lens of their personalities, right? Or how many fried chicken photos they took. So we want them to use this agenda
and to use this information to better inform their campaigns about what it is that Black communities care about. And then we actually want them to go and not just talk to Black communities about it, but we want them to go to white communities too, and Latinx communities, right? And Arab and Muslim communities, and talk about the same thing. You all right?
Yep,
I wish I had some water for you.
Yeah. Hey, somebody give me some water. No. So one of the issues I feel like is really, this is the Zen thing. This is where it comes in. One of the things that I feel like has really been present for me is we're in the 400th year.
Thank you.
Wow, magic. Thank you so much. We are in the 400th year since Black folks were brought over to this nation.
Yes.
And it is also the 50th year of the Manifesto for Reparations.
Yes.
So didn't you talk about reparations? Because I feel like that's in the zeitgeist and people are kind of like, I want to talk about reparations, I don't want to talk about reparations. We see the Black candidates like dancing around it. Have you talked about, did you talk to people in the census about
80% of the people who responded to our census said that they were in support of reparations for Black folks. I think one thing that is important for us to acknowledge is that in order to dismantle systems like racism or patriarchy or etc., that we have to first acknowledge that they have created damage. And then we have to work to remedy that damage. I think what ends up happening with this conversation around reparations and people being very timid around taking it up is that I think people don't know how to wrap their minds around it. What does it mean, right? What does it mean? Some people think it's cash reparations, right? And some people are advocating for that. Some people think it's creating more equity in systems, right? And actually doing more investment on the back end to make sure that Black communities get our due. What I think is incumbent upon us all to be thinking about in relationship to reparations is not so much what is the method, but I think we actually have to start with the acknowledgement, the real and true and deep acknowledgement of the damage and the harm that has been done. Just 8 years ago, people were saying that racism is over because we elected a Black president. Right? So unless we're actually willing to deal with the reality of the devastation that chattel slavery caused in this country and that it continues to cause today, then we actually can't even get to the point where we start talking about, so what is the remedy for that? So I actually feel like we've got a lot of work to do in our movement, and candidates have a lot of work to do because, shoot, the last time I was here, candidates were even having a hard time saying Black Lives Matter. So how are they going to talk about reparations if they couldn't say Black Lives Matter?
So let's get like really close and personal.
Okay.
What do you say to the folks that are progressive, that are brown folks, and particularly white folks that are trying to understand how they fit in the conversation? Like, what is it that you think keeps people from being able to address reparations and even just be able to like hold it cognitively?
I think what keeps people from even addressing reparations is the shame. Mm-hmm. The shame of what this country has done, the shame that we are all connected to it in some way, shape, or form, and the shame of what it means to acknowledge that responsibility. Now, a lot of people will say things like, well, I wasn't alive then. It doesn't have anything to do with me. But the reality is, if you are still upholding systems that are keeping communities poor, without access to education, without health care, without housing, without wealth, then you are still perpetuating those systems. You are a part of the problem. If we were able to move past that shame and say, yes, I am deeply ashamed of this, and because I am deeply ashamed and I want to rid myself of this shame, I want to look squarely in the face at what needs to be done to remedy the harm that has been caused. Imagine that there is somebody that you love very deeply, and you have hurt them. Something that you did hurt them. Do you look at them and say, let's just move on? Let's just move on.
Well, some of us do.
Or do you try and figure out, what can I do to get you to understand that, number one, I'm sorry. Number two, it won't happen again. And number three, tell me what we can do to restore back to to restore from the harm that has been caused. Lots of what we do is acknowledge that a thing happened, but we don't want to restore the harm. And without restoration, the wound is still there. It's still there. You can't just say, I'm sorry, and keep doing the same thing over and over again, because eventually people will be like, you're not sorry.
Exactly.
Why do we keep having this conversation?
Right. So what do we do with the shame? Because it seems to me that, and I share the same sensibility and belief that the shame, which I think of as really a weapon of whiteness, right? In the way that the brother was talking about how working class white folks were separated from black folks when they were all indentured servants. That shame is actually sort of built into the culture as a way in which to keep people silent, as a way in which people to, the way that I think about it is like, what else do you do when you see black bodies for sale in a market and you can't actually address it and you can't do anything about it? You have to put it someplace because we are meaning-making machines. And so shame has us like turn inward. It's actually what I say, like it's like a public expression. It's a public emotion. But what we do with that internally is it kind of turns in on ourselves. So what is the work that we have to do individually and collectively in order to work through what I think is this core thing, I'm not going way out to the folks that are, in the White House and that kind of thing, but I'm talking about folks that are in the room, folks that call themselves progressives, folks that believe in love and they believe in justice and they believe in redemption. What is it they have to do, would you say?
I think we have to figure out how to transform that shame into a deep and unabiding love for one another, which helps us show up when we are afraid to. My sister Jess talked earlier about how we don't keep turning away from concentration camps. We heard over and over again on this stage today that we have to keep showing up, and shame is the thing that keeps us from showing up. So we've got to be committed to transforming that shame into a deep and abiding love so that we can look and feel about each other like that lover that you just cannot get enough of. And even with that lover you can't get enough of, sometimes y'all got beef, right? Sometimes y'all got beef, but because that love is so deep, we keep turning towards each other. So that's what I'm advocating for. Continuing to turn towards each other and transform that energy not into like pity or navel gazing, but action. We have work to do, my people.
All right, y'all, you have your marching orders. It is time for us to turn our attention towards one another in love. Thank you so much, Alicia.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your work that has changed the conversation about race in this country, that has changed the conversation about ourselves, and has brought us to a point in which we can actually begin to think about what it is that we need to do to move through this and turn toward each other as I turn toward you in love.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Netroots Nation, please join Phone to Action now in room 126A for a reception and awards ceremony. Food and drink will be provided.